Vang, the Olympic loyalty test no one asked for. This winter, two Asian American women, Alyssa Liu and Eileen Gu, soared across Olympic ice and snow. One wrapped herself in the stars and stripes. The other chose to compete for China. And suddenly the country had very strong opinions about Asian daughters. I learned the quickest way to make America nervous is to let an Asian American woman make her own decisions, especially if she wins a gold medal. Liu beamed beneath the American flag and we exhaled. There she was, prodigy, child of immigrant success story, good daughter who did her homework and her triple jumps. She fits neatly into the national scrapbook, patriotism with creative colored hair and sequins. US skater Alyssa Liu after performing in the figure skating exhibition at the 2026 Winter Olympics in Milan, Italy, on February 21. AP photo Ashley Landis, The Associated Press. Gu, raised in California and skiing for China, has been cast differently, calculating, opportunistic, suspect. Cable news panels furrowed their brows. Politicians, including Vice President J.D. Vance, questioned the loyalty of globally mobile elites in ways that landed hardest on bodies like hers. The subtext was louder than a starter pistol at the Olympic finals. There is apparently a right way to be Asian American. And there is a wrong way. We are the model minority when compliant and the perpetual foreigner when inconvenient. What fascinates me is how quickly celebration curdles into interrogation. Both women are praised for being bicultural, fluent in languages, markets and expectations, until that biculturalism fails to affirm American supremacy. Global when it flatters us. Suspicious when it doesn't. Advertisement. Every 4 years, the world gathers beneath 5 interlocking rings and pretends, beautifully and briefly, that flags are just colors and anthems are just melodies. The Olympics sell us a dream, that humanity can compete without hatred, that excellence can transcend borders, that for a moment we are citizens of the same stadium. And yet, tucked inside that dream is a quieter, sharper question, one no athlete signed up to answer. Where does your loyalty lie? This is the story of Vang. Or perhaps it is the story of every athlete who has ever stood between 2 homes, 2 languages, 2 flags, and been asked to choose. The name on the jersey. Vang was born in a small apartment above a bakery in a city that smelled like diesel and cardamom. His parents had arrived years earlier with 2 suitcases and a stubborn belief in tomorrow. They worked long shifts. They saved coins in jars. They hung a faded flag from the old country in the kitchen, not as a protest, but as memory. At school, Vang learned a new anthem. At home, he hummed an older one. He learned to pronounce his name differently depending on who was asking. On the playground, he ran because running didn't require translation. Speed had no accent. The stopwatch didn't ask where he was from. It only asked how fast he could become. By 16, he was breaking records. By 20, he was a national hope. But the question was already circling. The invitation. It arrived as a polite email first. The athletic federation of his parents' homeland had noticed him. They were rebuilding their Olympic program. They needed talent. They needed symbols. They needed someone who looked like tomorrow. You could be our first, the message said. Our pride. Our bridge. A week later, the country where he was born, where he had trained on cracked tracks and in winter rain, called him in for a meeting. You are one of us, the official said, sliding a jersey across the table. We've invested in you. The people believe in you. Neither side threatened. Neither side demanded. They simply assumed. And in that assumption lay the loyalty test no one asked for. The invisible weight. Olympic medals are measured in grams. Loyalty is measured in silence. Friends began asking questions that sounded harmless. So, which flag would you choose? Where do you really feel at home? Social media did what social media does, turned nuance into a poll. Commentators debated identity as if it were a strategy. Analysts speculated about medal counts, about sponsorship markets, about diaspora narratives. Headlines used words like defection and betrayal, as though choosing a jersey were an act of war. But no one asked Vang what it felt like to be split in half by applause. He wasn't trying to betray anyone. He was trying to run. The myth of pure allegiance. The Olympics are built on a romantic idea, that athletes represent nations in their purest form. But modern life is rarely pure. Airplanes erase distance. Families scatter. Children inherit multiple histories. In stadiums, we cheer for flags as if they are fixed stars. But people are constellations, made of many lights. Vang didn't feel divided, he felt doubled. When he visited his parents' homeland, strangers embraced him. They called him son. They told him stories of resilience, of war and rebuilding, of dreams that had outlived hardship. They showed him the track where they hoped he would train young athletes one day. Back home, his childhood coach reminded him of rainy mornings and borrowed spikes. We believed in you before anyone else did, she said quietly. Both were true. Both were love. But love, when politicized, can turn into pressure. Training under a question mark. As the Olympic trials approached, Vang trained harder than ever. He lifted before sunrise. He ran intervals until his lungs burned. He visualized the finish line. He studied splits. He did everything athletes are supposed to do. But in the back of his mind was the image of two flags. In interviews, reporters tried to trap him gently. Have you decided? Do you feel more connected to one culture? Would representing your parents' country mean more emotionally? He learned to answer without answering. I'm grateful, he would say. I'm focused on performance. But the question lingered like humidity before a storm. The Olympics test endurance, strength, and discipline. They were also testing identity. The ceremony of choice. The deadline came quietly. A form. A signature. A federation stamp. There was no orchestra when Vang chose. No dramatic music. Just a pen scratching paper. He picked the country where he was born. It wasn't a rejection of his heritage. It wasn't a calculation of medal odds. It was the place where he had learned to dream in his own voice. But nuance doesn't trend. Within hours, headlines framed it differently. Vang turns down ancestral homeland. Missed opportunity for emerging nation. Some celebrated him as loyal. Others labeled him ungrateful. Strangers debated his character without knowing the smell of the bakery he grew up in. The Olympic loyalty test had graded him. The world had posted the results. Walking into the stadium. On opening night, he stood in the tunnel with thousands of athletes from around the world. The roar of the crowd felt like a living creature. The lights were brighter than memory. He wore his nation's colors. The flag patch sat over his heart. But beneath the fabric, there were two histories beating. As he marched, he thought of his parents watching from their apartment, the same one above the bakery. On the kitchen wall, both flags were hanging side by side. They had never asked him to choose.